Thank you for joining us again and welcome back to our channel. If you are joining us for the first time, we want to appreciate your time. In this episode, we are looking at why Africa awaits closure of French colonial crimes. 29 African nations are still awaiting restitution of the French army's crime and return of wealth looted from their land. We shall be discussing this like never before seen. I will explore a couple of countries in the continent, from Cameroon, Algeria, Senegal. I shall be looking at Madagascar and also Cameroon in details. Rwanda will feature as well. I will also explore Chad and Morocco as to the reason why France committed unbelievable atrocities in those countries during its colonial days, and it's still in its grips of those particular countries. So we would encourage you to watch this video to the end for clarity and understanding. So without any more delay, let's just dive straight into it. Time has failed to yield the colonial era crimes perpetrated by France in Africa. As many as 29 countries that were under French occupation in the continent are still pursuing reparations for the crimes and awaiting the return of wealth looted from their lands. Although French and African historians have unearthly volumes of evidence of colonial crimes, French leaders have consistently denied and attempted to conceal their black chapter history in the continent of Africa. Let's look into Algeria, for example. While visiting Algeria during his 2017 election campaign, French President Emmanuel Macron did admit that the French colonization of Algeria was a crime against humanity. From the occupation of Algeria in 1830, historically records also prove and suggest that colonial forces banned Islamic practices. On May 8, 1945, they killed people who were celebrating the end of World War II and were demanding independence. Records suggested that French soldiers engaged in genocide through people from helicopters. The scores of the decapitated Algerian leaders demanded freedom were exhibited at the Human Museums of Paris in 1880 to 1881. To this day, Algeria is still awaiting for repatriation of the scores to return, some of whom have been identified. Nicknamed the country of 1.5 million martyrs, Algeria's Maghreb region has witnessed mass killings. In the 1960s, the French detonated their first nuclear device in the Algerian desert in 1960, which was 3 to 4 times more powerful than the one dropped on the Japanese city of Hiroshima in 1945. Moving ahead, according to French newspaper Le Monde, no less than 16 atmospheric and underground explosions followed without any obligation to monitor the health of local population and environmental contamination. In all, 57 nuclear experiments and tests were between 1960 to 1966, according to French Info. If you look at the destruction in Senegal, moving forward, the West African country of Senegal witnessed the Thiorien massacre as France continued its colonial aspect in the continent of Africa. The West African country, Senegal, witnessed the Thiorien massacre, in which French soldiers killed Senegalese riflemen who had fought in World War II on behalf of France. They were killed for demanding allowances and positions, including pensions. Historians record that instead of being compensated, they were rooted up in front of self-propelled guns and murdered on December of 1944 as of the first. Although former French President François Hollande claimed in 2014 that 70 riflemen were killed, the numbers remain disputed. In an open letter, Boutan Senghor, son of the deceased, testified that his father was never buried in the grave and that the location of his burial site remains unknown. He disputed the former French president's claim that the victims were not in anonymous graves. Families of other riflemen have said that the French government is aware of other massacre graves. They have asked for the closure of the massacre by identifying the graves. Looking at other aspects, the French government had been trying to conceal the fact in the secular issue 3 days or after the French massacre. At the time, the French government claimed that the riflemen had received their remunerations. The trial that followed in March of 1945 further obfuscated facts as it led to the conviction and military degradation of 34 innocent people. If you look at the destruction as it continued into Madagascar, in the African nation, French army imposed severe repercussions and also repression and massacred tens of thousands of Malagasy people through torture, forced regroupings, summary executions, and burning of deer. Some were thrown from planes. After democratic movement for the Malagasy Renewal, the MDROM, the main indigenous political party, launched independence movement in 1946 by scrambling over 300,000 members resistance force. While the MDROM was dissolved after several months of defiance, its members were tried before French military court. Some were handed over death sentences. Historians report around 40,000 dead. The people who had taken refuge in the forest came out of their hiding places in a state of misery. The French authorities condemned Ranavalona III, the last queen of the country, to exile and also decided to maintain slavery, closed schools, imposed the French language, and made the natives pay taxes. If you look at France's activities in the continent of Africa, as we continue to look at the alarming activities and their presence in destroying the African continent, if we look at Cameroon, in Cameroon, the Union des Populaires de Cameroon, the UPC, a pro-independence party supported by the people, faced the wrath of the French administration. The country witnessed Bamileki's genocide. Recounting this tragedy, historians such as Thomas Demtombe, Manuel Domingue, and also Jacob Testisista, in the book entitled Cameroon with an RUN, a hidden war at the origins of French Africa, from 1948 to 1971, recorded that French soldiers exterminated over 400,000 Cameroonians in the Bamileke region. According to the Max Batex, a former soldier who served from 1962 to 1964 as a pilot in Cameroon, the army targeted the Bamileke people who supported the UPC party at the time. In his own words, it was a ruthless war. They were bombing, killing women and children, said Taji Yamenlong, a survivor of this war and companion of the NX Wandi, the UPC's vice president. According to Thomas Detombe, the French bombed villages, rounded up hundreds of thousands of villages in assembly areas and behind battered wires, and also carried out systematic torture in those particular chambers created by France. Testifying to France's discretions, Max Batek said that the officers accompanying him wanted to be reassured that there were no weaknesses to the story on the ground so as not to be implicated in France. Roland Prix and Pierre Messeme, two high commissioners, head of the French colonial administration in Cameroon, were charged with implementing a policy of violence. The English-speaking area also did not escape the French wrath, who blamed the British for hiding the nationalist aspect. With this justification, their penetration illegally into British Cameroon to carry out targeted assassination, while blaming London for fomenting unrest in the French colonies. Under French pressure, the British expelled many leaders who had taken refuge in that particular country in 1957. If you look at French authorities also in considering their impact issues in the continent of Africa as they plan to loot and destroy the continent of Africa. If you look at Rwanda, which is also known around the world with regards to its activities, considering Rwanda today, Rwanda 20 years ago was also declined to be a failed nation. But considering that the Rwandan people have put their country together, if you look at the destruction and also French influence in Rwanda, one of the worst genocide in the world's history, claiming over 800,000 lives of ethnic Tutsi in Rwanda, rests on the shoulders of France. Historians, human rights organizations, and other observers have reported that the French supplied arms to the Hutus after the Turquoise operation launched on June 23, 1994. French journalist Patrick Exupéry claimed that his country had launched this operation to reinforce the amendment of Hutu groups and did not ensure creating a secure zone as announced earlier. He claimed that the decision was endorsed by Herbert Verdun, former Secretary General of the Élysée Palace under the François Mitterrand regime. This accusation was denied by Vertrine in an interview published by Le Figaro in 2019. Speaking in other local media, he also denied France's involvement in the genocide, explaining that in 2008, Kigali had a report of accusation against his country fabricated. For him, according to his own statement, France is a failed firefighter after trying to stop the spiral of civil war between 1990 and 1994 in Rwanda. But after an observation mission in Rwanda by the International Federation for Human Rights, Jean Carbonneau, then president of Sauveille, a French organization and association created in 1984 to denounce France's colonial intervention in Africa, sounded the alarm. In particular, he warned about the organized policy of ethnic extermination and human crimes which France was involved through military and financial support to Rwanda government at that time. If you look at France's involvement in the continent of Africa, there is no reason why or no doubt why the African continent, especially those in French-speaking areas, are revolting against French presence in the region. If you consider Chad and Morocco as we close this episode, speaking to Anadolu Agency at the time, authors of colonial violence and resistance in Chad in 1900 to 1960, Debos Marile said the French were repressive after they took over the Achille after defeating Sultan Domdoumara from the 1909 to 1911. They touched several dozen villages and officially killed 1,302 people looking at those particular records, but the figures are probably over 1,500 to 2,000 looking at other historical figures. The uprising ended on August 12, 1911. Sultan Doumara surrendered on October 27. They occupied Kwadai effectively in 1911. He said the lack of archives also prevented tracing in details many events of the kind that happened in those particular area. If you look into Morocco in 1907, was a French attack caused over 1,500 to over 3,000 deaths depending on the sources at that particular time. Figures shows different. In 2 days, it followed the rebellion of the Choussou tribes who opposed French colonization. Recall Mohamed Badin, El Yatoum, someone who provided the details with regards to documents that existed with regards to French's presence and its activities. Among many examples, he cited the Rift War in the north was harshest that has ever existed in the country. As of that particular period, he said, if you look at France's extermination and also its presence in the continent of Africa, considering that in 1921 it all began, the Spanish, the troops of Mohammed Ben Abdelkrim El Gabadi, France's intervention and its army bombed hit civilians with agnostic bomb imported from France and Spain. He said in his record, in several African countries, historians and editorial writers recognize the difficulties of tracing history because of the lack of documentation. The French government has repeatedly denied access to its archives to documented historians. According to Thomas Dintombe, in several cases such as the massacre of the Bamilekis in Cameroon, the French government is apprehensive about the conclusion that can also be drawn once facts are also revealed to the world. France is facing an unprecedented riot across the continent of Africa. This is not going anywhere soon. As we look at this episode to draw down, we shall be bringing to you more atrocities caused by France in other countries across the continent of Africa. But for now, we will hang on these to let you know why France is facing incredible geopolitical challenges in the region and the reason why France abandoned those African countries and also exert its genocidal activities in the region. We want to thank you for watching. If you are new to this channel, we encourage you to check some of our informative video on this YouTube channel. We are looking forward to meeting you soon in our next episode. Have a good day. Bye-bye.